Hey there, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about 7 reasons why people dislike Chum-Li. But before we go on to that, if you end up liking the video, let us know by leaving a like and subscribing. It helps us out a lot and it lets us know you want to see more content like this. So without any further ado, let's get on to the video.
Number 1. A book from Isaac Newton's library.
I have a 1652 copy of Elias Ashmole's Theatrum Chemicum Britannicum. In it is the secret to creating the philosophy.
When Bob, a seller from Season 3, walks through the doors of Gold and Silver Pawn with a copy of 450-year-old book on alchemy that he believes is from Isaac Newton's library, he knows he has something special on his hands. Of course, the old man calls in rare books expert Gary, who informs everyone that it is indeed a book from the famous thinker's collection, although the cover has been restored and rebacked, probably done in the 1700s. Still, Gary places the retail value of the book at $20,000. Amazingly, Bob then accepts the old man's shockingly low offer of $7,000 after being told, "You know, if I give you $7,000 for it, I won't have money for dinner tonight." Apparently, the old man pays over $13,000 for a meal. Just to put a bow on top of this plainly awful deal, it turns out much of the rest of Newton's book collection has either been destroyed or archived at Trinity College, meaning in reality, this book is actually a priceless piece of history.
Sulfur and a little lead. If you come up with a secret to that, you can live forever and make gold. Or you died. So there's a form.
Number 2. 1890s Colt 45 Peacemaker Revolver.
Hey, how can I help you?
I'd like to try and sell this Colt revolver.
This is cool. Do you know much about it?
I know it's an old piece. I want to say 18.
In the Season 4 episode Peacemaker, Rick buys an eponymous 1890s Colt 45 revolver, which he says sells better than just about any antique gun he carries. Rick's excitement is palpable, especially after the seller Brian foolishly reveals that he purchased it for $25. They eventually agree on a price of $3,000. Upon inspection of the revolver, weapons expert Sean tells Rick that the gun is worth at least $5,000. But in fact, depending on how exactly rare the specific model is, it could be worth much more. For instance, the first ever Colt 45 Peacemaker, originally manufactured in 1873, was sold at auction in 1987 for a whopping $242,000, according to New York Times. Granted, the gun featured on Pawn Stars was from much later and was likely a part of a larger production line. But the current pricing on similar era Colt 45s ranges from about $2,000 all the way up to $42,000. So yes, Rick made an offer within that market range, but not surprisingly, it was on the extremely low end.
It was just a high quality gun. And this is an incredible set of grips. You have a Federal Eagle here. You have the shield, the lances.
Number 3. Hotchkiss Cannon.
A cannon. What can you tell me about this thing?
Well, it's an 1890s Hotchkiss cannon. They say it was used in the Indian.
Field artillery collector Chuck rolled his 1890 Hotchkiss cannon into the parking lot of Gold and Silver Pawn, aiming to land a deal. Things were looking up when Rick asked his weapons expert, "What can I pay for it and still make a few bucks?" To which he replied, "I would say $40,000 all day long." Of course, Chuck is pleased, but then he immediately commits the fatal flaw of any negotiation, which is to reveal his bottom line. Chuck says he only expected about $30,000 for it, instantly guaranteeing that he's gonna lose $10,000. Rick capitalizes on Chuck's misstep and agrees to $30,000 as long as the cannon still fires. It does, and they shake on the deal. Obviously, you could say, well, that's the seller's fault for undercutting himself. But clearly, Rick knew what he was doing, and he expertly capitalized on the seller's low expectations.
Okay. This is the first modern, self-contained cartridge firing gun in American inventory. Because the patina...
Number 4. 1984 Chris Craft boat.
Kill me. He hates boats.
Oh, it's nice, man.
It needs a little bit more work than I can afford to put back into it.
Yeah, my dad always told me, man, these things were a whole...
In a very early episode of Pawn Stars, Corey takes a supposedly huge gamble on buying a 1984 Chris Craft boat for $16,500. To make matters worse, he does this before even having an expert look it over. As has become a regular shtick on the show, Rick and the old man hem and haw at how much Corey spent on such a risky purchase, until it's later revealed that with just $4,000 of restoration work, the boat has been restored to an approximate retail value of $30,000. That probably made for an awkward viewing for seller Dino when he purchased the boat for $25,000 6 months ago and was looking to hopefully get no less than $20,000 for it. He said it needs a little bit more work than I can afford to put into it, having no clue that if he would have just somehow coughed up $4,000, he could have been looking at a potential break even rather than an $8,500 loss.
I'm a little worried about the cost, because when you're restoring an old car like that, I mean, you can get halfway through it and run into a big problem, and it's not like you can quit.
Number 5. 1962 Lincoln Continental.
Today is the day we give Richard Sr. from the pawn shop his baby. It's taking a whole lot more time as we put the finishing touches on.
In another Season 1 episode, Rick and the old man make a steal of a deal on a restored 1962 Lincoln Continental. The seller, Devin, says that he did most of the engine work himself, but he's put enough time and money into it that he's ready to let it go. He says he wants to get $13,000 to $14,000, but the classic beauty has a seriously neglected interior, so Devin eventually parts ways with it for just $9,500. Interestingly, they note that the original showroom price for the vehicle was $10,000, meaning they actually paid less for the car in 2009 than it cost new in 1962. Not usually the case with classic cars in relatively decent shape. Anyway, there's the usual hand-wringing over whether the restoration costs will financially destroy them, but they didn't. They spent $15,000 to get the car back into showroom shape, but were left with a vehicle worth $30,000 to $35,000 depending on the buyer. All of this to say that it was a possible $5,500 or $10,500 gain for the Pawn Stars.
Like Richard Sr. himself, this car is a true original. Besides a few modern touches like air conditioning, she's restored like the day she rolled off the production line.
Number 6. Yasutsugu Samurai Sword.
Hey, Mike, how you doing, buddy?
Hey, what's up, Corey? May I take a look at your sword?
There we go. Beauty. Wow, it looks awesome, man.
Sweet. Samurais are pretty bad.
In what is probably the most egregious example of the guys knowingly underpaying for an item, Corey slashed through a negotiation on a 15th century samurai sword that could potentially net the shop over $10,000. The seller, David, claimed to be a lawyer who'd kept the sword after a client used it as collateral, then failed to return to claim it. Just before the haggling started, Corey admitted via backroom confessional that he'd seen a few sell for thousands of dollars, which is why his opening offer of $800 was laughably shady. The seller, woefully unprepared for the negotiation, said when he offered me $800, I wanted to jump and do a dance, but I had to keep my cool because the price was still going up. They agreed on $1,500, and an expert later determined it could be worth about $5,000 to $6,000 in its current condition. However, should Corey be willing to do a $3,000 restoration, he could fetch as much as $15,000 for it. That's a score, Big Hoss, Chumlee says as he and Corey high-five.
So, can you tell me about these things? Or should I ask you? Yeah, check them out.
So generally, when you're looking at swords to buy...
Number 7. Autographed screenplay for The Godfather.
What we got here?
Seinfeld, last episode, signed cast script.
Okay.
To my knowledge, this was only given out to friends.
This one falls into the category of almost a ripoff, since the seller Diane didn't part with her item. A copy of The Godfather screenplay signed by Al, but we're including it here because of what a bad offer it really was. After Rick's handwriting expert John verifies that Diane's leather-bound screenplay is indeed signed by Al Pacino, Rick offers Diane $500 for it, particularly based on John's suggestion that it would only bring in $1,000 at auction. She simply leaves, saying, now that we know it's Al Pacino's signature, a fundraiser would probably net more money than that, and she couldn't have been more right. According to the Las Vegas Sun, Diane Hutchinson was with Catholic Charities of Southern Nevada, and had obtained the signed screenplay when it was donated, along with thousands of books. When she eventually auctioned off Michael Corleone's real-life John Hancock, it fetched an amazing $12,000. Oh my gosh, to think those guys offered me $500. What if I had said yes, taken the $500 and run, Hutton said. But that's not even the best part. When Godfather producer Al Ruddy got wind of the auction, he stepped forward to say that he really was the Al who signed the script, making the Pawn Stars' valuation wrong for an entirely different reason, and leaving their handwriting expert with egg on his face.
Like 70 million people or something like that watched it.
Yep.
So, do you want to sell it?
I do want to sell it. It's been on my wall a little too long, I think.
Number 8. Baseball signed by the 1951 New York Yankees.
I got a Dodgers signed World Series baseball.
All right.
And you got a certificate of authenticity here?
Yes.
Let me take a look at it real quick. Official Rawlings National League.
Another near miss for a would-be cheated customer came when the old man threw a screwball of an offer at seller Clint, who showed up with a baseball signed by the 1951 World Series champion New York Yankees. After handwriting expert Brenda compared the signature on the ball with authentic signatures she brought with her and determined they were real, she offered this helpful advice. The value of the ball is really subjective. It just comes down to what a buyer is willing to pay for it, and what the seller is willing to go for it. Clint had already pitched $3,000 as his initial asking price, to which the old man, probably sensing the stinker he was about to send back, said, "I'm gonna shoot you a price. If you don't like it, don't hit me. But I'd be a buyer at about $800. Clint respectfully denied and went on his way, and it's a good thing he did. In 2017, a similar ball was featured on Antiques Roadshow, only this ball was also signed by Marilyn Monroe, who later married team captain Joe DiMaggio. That ball was appraised at $15,000 because it included Marilyn Monroe's autograph, but the expert valued it at $5,000 to $7,000 if it were missing hers. In other words, the old man swung for the rip-off fences, but fortunately for customer Clint, he struck out hard.
Back to the sweet spot. That's awesome.
Right.
The guy was a really good pitcher. I mean, he was the youngest person ever elected into the Hall of Fame. At the time, him.
That's the end of the video. If you have another example of times where customers got scammed hard, let us know in the comments below. If you've been watching for this long and aren't subscribed already, go ahead and do that now. The button's just below the video. As always, thank you for watching and have a great day.